Oh, Paul Macdonald, thank you so much for coming on the Borderline podcast this evening. How are you doing, mate?
I'm good. Good. It's good to be here, Andrew. Cheers.
Good, man. And let's say we've had a little bit of difficulty connecting together. Been a big old storm last week that didn't do us any favors. I'm glad to be finally sitting down and speaking to you. And like I said to you in the pre-chat, this is a subject that is very, very, very close to me. I've always had a curious mind. I've always assumed nothing, question everything. And this all started around my own sighting. But before we get into that, how did you fall into obviously being the admin of a 10,000 member page on Facebook called the Scottish Big Cat Sightings UK?
Yeah. Well, I joined that group out of my own interest, which does stretch back quite some years. And I only got involved, though, really a bit more in big cat research after a local sighting here in the Borders in 2019. Mm-hmm. And following up on that, I found the Big Cat Sightings in Scotland group, and got on board with that and just started to engage. And it was maybe a year or so, I think only about a year or so after that unfortunately the founder of that group passed away, and so the admin side of that fell to myself. But that's been going quite strongly, and it's been gaining more followers ever since.
Yeah, I was going to say, because, I mean, I'm pretty sure the way that people join that group, other than their own intrigue, is probably because they've had their own sighting. It's how I joined that group. My wife, for ages, told me she was a member of the group. She's not had a sighting, and she was like, I'm reading all these sightings. You should put your sighting on.
Yeah.
Well, that was a while ago. And then I started reading them. I'm like, hang on now. There's actually loads of people that's had these sightings. I knew that a lot of people have them, but I didn't actually realize just how many people have them. You know, on average, on that group alone, how many new posts, new sightings do you think that you maybe see typically every week or month?
It's difficult to say because there's not a steady flow, if you like, throughout any year. We do, though, recognise certain spikes at certain times of the year, and I think there's understandable reasons for that. But you can certainly say the activity is continuous. It's quite steady. It's fairly steady, but it's fairly continuous throughout the year. The number of sightings also do seem to be on the up. Mm-hmm. You know, in past years, if you're taking a span of decades, then it does seem to be on the up, which is what you would expect if you're not just looking at a few creatures out there, but in fact a breeding population.
Yeah, and as I say, that's always been the kind of question that I've always kind of asked. Is there the breeding populations that you would probably need to sustain that into an ecosystem? So let's just roll the years back a little bit, if you don't mind. Am I right to assume that you joined the Scottish Big Cat page because of your own sighting, or has this always been a heavy interest of yourself?
Yeah, that's right. My own interest does go back to my own first sighting, which was, I think it would have been 87, 88, thereabouts. Actually, 86, 87, as I was going to school on the train on the West Highland line. And clear as day, both myself and my friend, sitting beside the window, saw it at the same time as the train was moving fairly slowly over the viaduct at Glenfinnan, because it can't just get across it. And clear as day, there was a black leopard, which, you know, is not something you expect to see, is not something anyone expects to see in the wilds in Scotland. We realised we weren't on safari at the time, we were just going to school and what's going on? But it was very close enough to the train that it was so clear in the early morning light full on it to see. And that stuck with us. And it stuck with us enough over the years and decades that every tiny newspaper article that you saw talking about another sighting or talking about livestock being ravished and reports of big cats in different areas throughout Scotland, that's when it started to make me think, this seems to be more than one animal. This seems to be in various areas of Scotland, and it just makes you think, what's going on? But I never had a chance to do anything about it, or didn't decide to, start something, do something, until moved to the Borders 2017, and a couple of years later there was a local sighting here, and I followed up on that, and we found evidence on that, and the claws were in, you could say, from there.
Yeah. Well, nice pun, bravo on that one, Paul. Yeah, that's it. although I wasn't on a train, I guess there's slight similarities to your mind sighting. I'm from the borders, which is kind of ironic because we had a little time called IMO, and this would. I'm sorry, I'm just going. Like I say, I go on a tangent all the time. I'm just going to tell you my sighting now. how close they are together. You can tell I've been itching to talk about it. Yeah, so I think mine's would have been. So I had two, and I don't know if this is basically this is something that I was going to ask you if you've maybe heard anything like this before. So I had two sightings. I can't remember if they were night after night or if there was or if there was a day in between. So basically, I'm going back maybe 2005, 2006, and I was playing golf one evening with my best pal at the time, just across the Imhoff golf course, which is a Lynx golf course. It's quite an open area. It's certainly not an area where you would find a predator that you'd assume to find a predator, but there's a lot of deer around there. There's obviously a lot of rabbits, a lot of hare, plenty of food for it. And we're coming down the 18th hole. Now, on the 18th hole, you kind of go up a little hill before you look back down into the middle of the fairway. And on the right-hand side of that, a load of trees. Now, I've never been one to be able to stick their fingers in their mouth and whistle, but my friend's really, really, really good at it. So I'm there taking some practice swings, and the next thing I hear the shh of a whistle. And he's stood across, he's maybe about 50 yards from me to the left, pointing his club down into this fairway. And I look up, and right enough, but halfway across the fairway is this big black cat. Now, you look at it for a bit, and the initial thing that I thought was, it's a cat, that's not a dog. That's dog, that's a cat, and that's a really, really, really big cat. And I can remember its tail being the thing of, wow, that's not a normal cat. Now, a little bit more background about me, to maybe make this a little bit more plausible, is I've trained in I went to university for animal biology. I've worked in the rainforest with jaguars, mountain lions. I can tell the difference between a cat and a dog. I've been able to tell the difference between a cat and a dog for many years.
And big and small.
Tell you this was not a dog. And that's from somebody with a bit of a standpoint in that as well. And we watched this thing, not bound, but pace across the fairways, and it dipped across into the trees on the other side. Didn't think anything of it. Kind of thought that was a bit weird, was it not? And spoke about it. But we both kind of joked into ourselves that it was a dog, but we knew it was a cat. We just didn't want to embarrass ourselves by actually believing it was a big cat.
Yeah, just a dog, yeah.
So didn't think anything of it. And then, let's say, whether it's the next night or the night after, roughly exactly the same time of night, so maybe around about 8:30 at night, spring, summertime, so sun's just setting, exactly the same hole, exactly the same place. Here we come across the top of this fairway, and this time I noticed it first, and its head and its shoulders were just out of the tree line, and that's straight away. I noticed it because it was right next to the 150-yard marker. And instead of walking, this thing ran across the fairway this time, and it bounded across the fairways. But the most telling bit of evidence that I could take from that was that actually this time it walked behind the second hole green, and that green had really high rough in it, really high grass, and you could just make out the top of that animal.
Okay.
To the top of that grass.
Gave you something to scale it by. Yeah.
So we were 17 or 18 at the time. Probably not the wisest thing to do. Went and walked straight after it just disappeared again to see how big is that? Not wise. But
we'll see how big that scary beastie is.
It was. And we went up and we walked through the grass, and the grass is over our kneecaps.
Yeah,
so for
right.
Scale, we've got something up there straight away. Now I'm 5'11". My friend's about 6'5".
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there's differences in her kneecaps, but it's above mine, so that's relative.
That's no moggy.
It's not a moggy. It's not a moggy, and I can tell you again, it wasn't a bloody dog either.
It's interesting. Your sightings were on a golf course. We notice when we map sightings, which is one of the main focuses of the research team, and we've built quite a significant picture already, still being added to constantly. We have over 1,600 sightings mapped throughout Scotland. And from mapping, you can get a lot of information from this. You can get not just concentrations and timelines of activities and consistencies of species being reported, but habitats, where they're being seen, and the nature of sightings, why they're typically being seen. But golf courses, feature quite strongly. It's not uncommon, actually. And at first, when we started doing this and we're, trying to make sense of it all, and we're thinking, there's another golf course sighting, and we're wondering why, but it's quite understandable, I think. A golf course presents a man-made but perfect dining table for a big cat.
Yeah.
It presents the kind of solid ground and flat grass, short grass, that makes their approach silent, whether they're moving slowly or quickly. And of course, after hours especially, any golf course is teeming with prey. It's teeming with rabbits and deer. And it's got pockets of cover. It's got hedges, it's got trees, bushes, and that's perfect for an ambush predator. Where the prey go, they go first. And if they're turning up on the perfect ambush environment, well, it's almost tailor-made for them. And so it's no surprise to us now when we hear about them on golf courses, because it really presents the perfect ambush environment for them.
Yeah, well, and just to go on that, the other point on golf courses that I you can correct me if I'm wrong here, I don't know many golf courses that don't have a single bit of water running through them too. Again, there's a source there, there's the invitation, and I know firsthand, I very rarely walk around that golf course without looking somewhere and thinking, is it there again? Looking in the gorse bushes and whatnot. As you say there's so much cover for them. You've got prey, you've got water, you've got protection, shelter, huge open spans. Perfect. Yeah, I never actually thought of them actually being that common in golf courses until you put that all together. Yeah. I take it, obviously you were saying there that species sighting, obviously me and you've had quite a similar one where we're talking about a black leopard, presumably. Is that the kind of textbook sighting report that you hear about, or are there other big cats? Obviously, I know that the Lynx has been in the news of recently, up at the Cairngorms and whatnot. But is there any other species that typically come across quite common with sightings?
Yeah, we can say that quite confidently. There are three main species that are consistently reported, not just in Scotland, throughout the British Isles. Mm-hmm. And that's primarily black leopard. And then the next proportion of sightings down from that would be Puma. Mm-hmm. Puma, cougar, mountain lion, it's all the same name for the same species. And Lynx is the smaller amount of sightings, but they're quite unmistakable in a way, because lynx are such weird-looking creatures. Yeah, they're so distinctive, and it's all the you get a good number of the distinctive markers of lynx being reported when a lynx is seen. But that's the three species that consistently, for decades, have been reported.
Yeah, so like you say, for decades. So how do you black leopards? So now we know that lynx used to live here. As far as black leopards, and did mountain lion was mountain lion ever a species?
No.
I didn't think so.
Mountain lion's really only native to North and South America.
I thought it was the Americas. Yeah. So we've got two species there that you would class as invasive. That not from here. So what are your theories of how they got here? Obviously, the lynx made maybe a slightly different entity to that being extinct and have gone extinct.
It's a good question. We often get asked, what are they doing here in the first place? But I think that's actually part of the picture we understand more about than anything else. And I can say that's probably part of the mystery that's resolved to an extent. There's one major flashpoint we can look back to in 1976, and that was the introduction of the Dangerous Wild Animals Act. So prior to 1976, there was no regulation at all for big cats. And you could walk into pet shops in not just London, but Edinburgh and Glasgow, and pick yourself up a leopard or two, or a puma or two, or a lynx or two.
Incredibly.
They sold them because there was no regulations on the pet market about it. So as soon, of course, as leopards were being walked, in the middle of London, and we had a fellow tell us at the Scottish Game Fair, I mind seeing this lassie walking her two pet leopards down Princess Street Gardens in the late 60s. Folk used to do this. So the more they're being seen out in public, of course, then I think there must have been pressure on the government at some point, 1975 perhaps, to do something about this. And they brought in what's called, and still stands as, the Dangerous Wild Animals Act, 1976. So it wasn't just not cheap to buy into, you then had to keep your animal in a certain size of enclosure.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, some of these animals, quite a lot of them were being kept in flats, and folk just logistically couldn't do that. The only other option offered, sadly, was to bring your animal in and have it put down. But you're looking at pets, They're apex predators, yes, but they're being bought and owned as pets in homes. So they've probably got names, and they've probably been, at least for weeks or months, part of the family.
Yep.
So folk were less inclined to bring them in to have them put down. The zoos are full. They're not taken anymore. So it was always that third option, and a very easy third option, because you didn't have it registered in any way to begin with. Mm-hmm. Then who's going to know?
Who's going to know, yeah.
So it was always an easy third option for owners. And since 1976, we've had owners come out and admit, oh yeah, I released some pumas up in this area or some black leopards over here. And these releases were not technically illegal at the time, because the government didn't realise they hadn't closed that loophole.
Mm-hmm.
Even when they brought the act in, it wasn't illegal to release them. So they've closed that loophole about a year later. But in that year, there were multiple release events throughout the British Isles. And that was the flashpoint to actually prove the foundation of an established breeding populations.
Yep.
But it didn't stop the trade, because the trade then went underground, became the black market. So when you illegally own an animal and you get to a stage where you logistically or financially can't support it, what's your options? You can't take it to a zoo, you can't take it to a wildlife park or any legal authority, or you're holding your hands up to get cuffed. So it was, again, a natural choice for folk to make. Take it out the wilds, let it loose, at least give it a chance to live. And you're taking a cat and letting it loose, which, are the most adaptable creatures on the planet. Of course it'll live quite happy. There are, countless feral cats, as it is in the UK, that have just decided to take that life, and they live out quite happy. So it wasn't just 1970s. Population were topped up and added to as a result of the illicit trade in exotic species ever since. And so certainly when it comes to leopard and puma, that is a very determinable origin story right there. Yeah. In terms of lynx, there may be more going on with that in Scotland in a different way, and that there's an evidence trail or a historic trail that suggests they never went extinct.
Yeah.
There's actually more evidence to suggest that than any evidence to confirm they went extinct. I think that's always been an unsupported academic idea. But what we do have from our lynx-centric map that we do have now, it's just all the lynx sightings in Scotland, is the earliest sighting we have there is 1968. And that's not including a newspaper article from 1927 from Inverness-shire confirming that 3 lynx were shot up there. So we understand that lynx have been present in Scotland for at least 50 years.
Yeah.
And probably significantly longer.
I was going to say, I might be wrong here, and I think it will be after 1976, but is there not a legitimate story of a police officer hitting a lynx in Scotland as well, or knocking down? I'm sure I've seen that on a programme somewhere. That could be the 80s or 90s, though, so it doesn't pan into the extinct period.
There have been a few. Yeah, there's been a few hit by cars. There's been a few shot. We've had stories get to us of lynx and leopards also being shot. We've even tried to follow up on that, because obviously the carcass of a lynx or big cat would be kind of evidence gold, and we could learn a lot from getting that fully tested to try and confirm perhaps its own origin, where it perhaps came from in the world, the age of the animal at the time. And we always hit brick walls and dead ends with that, unfortunately. But we've been aware of a number of cases where they've been shot, but where they are shot, they go to ground. They're buried for fears of repercussions, and the farmers or gamekeepers not wanting it known generally that they're active, and for folk to come looking for them anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And kind of keying in there again just on lynx. Lynx are slightly, well, they're quite small, quite a bit smaller than what a black leopard and a mountain lion. So
generally lynx would be around 3 foot in the body.
Yeah, for that. So what? I guess that's a good little question just now. Typically, if I'm out, just say I had no idea about this subject, and I'm out walking my dog tonight, and I see a cat, big cat. What would define the difference between a black leopard, a mountain lion, and a lynx? You know, what are the key differences between those three species that an observer would see?
Yeah. There is one main distinguishing marker, if you see it clearly enough to go by, is the tail. Pretty much every species of cat has a very distinctive tail length and shape. Yeah. So leopard, again and again, countless times we always get reported, the tail seemed to be as long as the body, or almost as long as the body.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. They've got this very long, almost kind of uniform diameter of tail that sweeps out, it sweeps down and curls back up. And a lot of folk will say kind of shaped like a question mark, or, you know, curling up at the end. And it has to, because of the length of the tail, it has to keep it off the ground most of the time, you know?
Yeah.
So that's a very distinctive feature of black leopard. Size-wise, it depends on the age. For a full-grown adult, they can be typically 4 foot to 5 foot long in the body. They can be up to about 6 foot for males, but they tend to be 4 to 5 foot in the body. Puma are not black. They are brown. That brown colour can be, depending on the light you're seeing it in, anything from a light sandy colour to a darker brown. Could be seen as fawn coloured, tan coloured, even grey in certain lights. So we have to take that into account with reports, the colours reported. But their tail's a bit different. It's not as long as a leopard, but it's very bushy. A lot of folks say kind of like the thick end of a baseball bat, you know, that very bushy, thick tail that looks reasonably long. Both of those species, leopard and puma, have very distinctive ears. They're not like domestic cat ears that are generally pointy, but they have little, a lot of folks say like teddy bear ears, rounded ears on top of the head. Rounded ears is a great distinctive marker. The puma generally has a bit of white around its muzzle, around the face, and has a white underbelly going down from its neck down the belly. So that's another distinctive marker. Lynx are kind of the strange child of the cat family. They're so weird looking. Yeah. They've got so many distinctive markers. So they only grow to about 3 to 3.5 foot long in the body. They've got very distinctive pointy ears with tufts of hair, black tufts of hair sticking out the top. They've got a face that looks like it's got a beard and whiskers, right? White kind of beard and whiskers coming out. They've got lanky looking legs, and they've got a weird kind of gait. They don't flow, if you like, as smoothly as a leopard if you see it run or bolt. And they've got these little stumpy tails, right? Little stumpy tail with a black tip on it. Very distinctive. And the coat, if it's a Eurasian lynx, is generally going to be brown or reddish brown with black spots all over it. So really distinctive to see. And a lot of folk, a lot of witnesses know what a lynx looks like. So as soon as they see it, they know there's nothing else that it can be.
It could possibly be. Yeah. So do you have, is one of them species a more standout candidate for, you know, the more common sightings that you see, or is it quite varied between the three?
I'd say we get reports of all three in, you know, through the year, but mostly it's black leopard. And I think there's understandable reasons for that too. I think there's probably more of them just out there than the other two species. They are solitary felids, so they range, you know, they range solitary by nature. They're only usually together for a week or two at a time for mating, and then the lad disappears. But they have quite a large ranging territory. So when they have quite a large ranging territory, pretty much anywhere on the map in Scotland, and take a block of anywhere from 25 to 100 square miles, you're probably taking in a road or two within that ranging territory. And invariably, that's when they're being seen, when they're breaking cover. Because naturally, they will stick to cover like glue. Mm-hmm. But it's when they're breaking cover and they're either casually strolling or bolting across a road, feet or meters away from a car approaching, that's when it catches someone by complete surprise. But they're seeing it for long enough and clear enough and close enough that they're reporting in the size, the scaling according to the length of the road, the tail shape, ear shape. All of this starts to come across in sightings that are that close. And invariably it's when they're breaking cover.
Yeah, which puts my sighting down to T. Like I say, I never would have seen it if it was out there in the woods to begin with,
Yeah, exactly.
It's true. So, like we say, these animals they're pretty much solitary, but they do have, like you said, they have a huge range of their territory as well, don't they? So, when we're speaking about, small pockets that could breed, you don't actually need that many in terms of the range, because Scotland being quite a small country, you could actually make that up with quite a small population of animals, couldn't you?
Yeah. And there's a very distinctive tell to our mapping that when we look in any one localized area, then the timelines become important. When things are seen and for how long certain species are reported. Any of these cats tend to live out in the wild quite naturally for anywhere from 12 to 15 years is quite usual.
Yep.
And where we are seeing activity of the same species being reported for 20, 30, 40, 50 years even, then that's telling you something that, no cat's immortal. They're living out because they're breeding and successfully breeding in the wild. And they are also sometimes seen in pairs, and they're sometimes seen with cubs, which is amazing to hear.
Yeah.
We have some very close and clear encounters of black leopards with cubs being very clearly seen with one or two cubs, the mother and cubs together. That, along with the timeline of decades worth of same species going on, it absolutely tells you they're here, and they've been here for quite some time.
Yeah. But I say I totally agree with you. Absolutely agree with that. So speaking about like range and kind of geography, is there, and just sticking with Scotland, is there typically more favourable areas of Scotland that you tend to get more sightings from than others?
To be honest, this subject constantly blows us away, and we've got our heads fully in the research, and it's constantly blowing us away in terms of the scale of it. Yeah. You might think from a map of these sightings, we get a little pocket over here, a little pocket over there. To some extent, that's true, but it extends out from these little pockets to literally the length and breadth of the country.
Yeah.
Quite literally the length and breadth of the country, which is fascinating, because it's presenting itself as a much bigger picture than I think any of us know.
Mm-hmm.
We also conservatively estimate over 1,600 sightings so far. We conservatively reckon that is no more than 1% to 5% of all sightings.
Wow.
Because most will go unreported. Most will go unreported over the decades, and that's just the ones we've picked up on. So this is why it constantly blows us away. I think it's a much larger picture than anyone realizes.
Yeah, that's crazy when you put it into them terms, actually thinking it back, because again, it goes into my thing that, for years I knew this had went on, but it just stayed logged with me and my friend and whoever else had decided to tell vocally. That's where that stayed. It didn't get reported or anything like that. And then when I can remember my granddad as well telling me a story, he never admitted that he'd seen a big cat. He used to be a postie. He says one day he broken down on the back roads and he was stuck in a phone box trying to phone back to his office. And the next thing he sees this thing binging across, but I never told anybody because he was a very close person. It's only when I was speaking about my own thing. So you really, that is actually true, isn't it? Wow. I say 1,600 and 5%. Wow.
Yeah.
So is there, I know this is pretty much impossible, I guess, pretty much impossible question to answer. Is there, a minimum number of individuals that would be required to sustain a breeding population, I guess, is what I'm going to ask there. What do you guys reckon with your research? How many do you reckon that we possibly have here is what I'm trying to ask.
I saw that coming. And it's a question everyone wants to know. We'd love to know. Yeah. We would love to know, but it's an almost impossible figure to realise. And I say that and I qualify that because Scottish wildcat is a given. We know it's out there. We know it's well studied, but the organisations involved in its study can give you figures anywhere from 80 to 400 as to how many are out there.
Yeah.
And this is a species that is studied professionally, by numerous groups.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's that much of disparity about a known species of cat out there, almost impossible for us to know at the moment how many are out there. But we can get an idea. Mm-hmm. And I say we can get an idea because our national mapping, we distill it into several other more specific maps. One of those is only the sightings in the last 5 years.
Right, okay, cool.
Right, so if any cat lives out for 12 to 15 years, that sighting, that cat is probably still kicking about now. So we deem that our active areas map. And just from that, I think we have, we've surpassed 400 sightings on that active areas map. I can say that. That map will never go online. Our golden rule is we never disclose active areas online in the interest of preserving the animals.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if we've got over 400 sightings, those cats are probably still out there. That's not saying that's 400 cats, because there will be multiple sightings for any one particular cat, we can imagine. Mm-hmm. But what we can confidently say, all we can confidently say, is dozens perhaps getting into triple figures.
Yeah.
That is all we can realistically, but I think very confident, very conservatively say.
Yeah, well, a lot of people would go, really? What? But I'm pretty sure the Amur leopard, again, another species that we know exists, I could be wrong here, but I want to say at one time there was only 16 of them left in the wild. People could spend their entire career professionally trying to document them, but they could never find them. They just knew that they were there because they'd been tagged.
Yeah. These are naturally the most elusive creatures in the world, which gives us the biggest challenge in the world.
Yeah.
In trying to build this picture, because it is an elusive picture. Yeah, it's a difficult thing, but we've had also folk from South Africa and India both tell us that you can live with a healthy known population of leopards round about you, and you'll never see one in your lifetime.
Yeah. Yeah, I could imagine that. They're so elusive.
Yeah, yep. I mean, like I said earlier, they are mostly being seen where they're breaking cover. Mm-hmm. Curiously enough, I mentioned about spikes of sightings during the year. When the summer, so when spring really starts to kick in and the vegetation shoots up, now the cats have got even more cover to range out in. So they can more confidently take experimental ranging routes and maybe be crossing roads or areas they're not usually crossing, so that there's more a likelihood they're being seen. And we see a spike in sightings around that time. But then harvest time, suddenly a lot of the cover just disappears overnight, literally. And they might be bolting out of a forest chasing a deer, and suddenly they're doing that across an open field. Yep. And they're being seen. So, interestingly enough, the spikes we're seeing are relating to the environment and cover that's either there or not at the time.
Yeah, and prey species as well. Like I say, we've got an abundance in Scotland, especially. I know there has always been the argument about reintroducing the likes of lynx, wolves, bears to try and pull down the deer numbers more up in the Highlands. I don't know if we have problems with deer down here as much as the borders as much. But again, there's just so much for them to thrive off. And we're talking about, like you mentioned before, probably the most adaptable species on the planet, or land animal on the planet. You go back historically, the cats outlived everything going back to the dire wolf days. The cat still reigns supreme then as well. And, they can adapt so well. And when we're talking about such a varied landscape in Scotland as well, I'm not saying that we've got the little rolling hills down here and the peaks up in the Highlands. Going back to what you're saying there about people in South Africa or India not seeing animals that they know exist there, it must at times feel impossible to try and get that one bit of irrefutable evidence is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So
yes, yeah.
is that what you guys are? I know this might sound a bit of a stupid question, but is that your goal? I take it as a group is to find that irrefutable bit of DNA evidence or a specimen itself.
Yeah, it's one of our goals, and really, really one of the purposes that, reasons we do what we do. One is intelligence gathering. Our aim is to gather as many sightings as possible, good sightings. There's a lot we don't map, and there's a lot we don't map because there's just not enough information. If we don't have a specific enough location, if there's any question or doubt or just not enough detail to confirm what we're looking at, it just doesn't go in the map. And there's a good number of those. But yeah, chasing the physical evidence, behind the sightings is important, because the sightings evidence base is a good focus, and it's corroborative. We're not just looking at a few, we're looking at, over 1,600 now, and that's massively corroborative evidence, and that's important. But obviously we need to back this up with physical evidence. I would say we already have that to some extent. We have a good number of 10 out of 10 print images, as well as casts of prints that are 10 out of 10 for the different species we're looking at. We have kill evidence, associated kill evidence. There is only one animal that will take a sheep or a deer up a tree. And we've got evidence of that, as well as the way in which big cats impact and predate large prey such as deer or sheep. There's certain ways they do that. Other animals and scavengers just don't, and we've got all that evidence too. What we are chasing at the moment is DNA, conclusive DNA evidence in Scotland. We have a sample. I've got a sample sitting in my freezer right now that hopefully is going to provide that when it gets submitted. So there's always ongoing new finds being made. But what we do is whenever we get a fresh sighting in, and sometimes that can be within minutes of it happening, I'll get a panicked phone call, or I'll get a very excitable email or Facebook message saying what someone's just seen. I'll turn to our research team. Mm-hmm. So we have a team of over 80 members all throughout Scotland, and I'll say, all right, Fife team or wherever it is, who can make it out, deploy, meet with the witness, they'll show you exactly where it was, and then we'll look for the hard evidence. And the first thing we look for is prints, which might sound easy if you just turn up and the witness says it was exactly right there, and you expect to just go and cast a print. 10 out of 10 print for any animal.
Incredibly hard.
It's actually not an easy thing. You need the right consistency of mud or clay or sand or snow to pick that up on. Snow helps, but it's not here for long. And so, yeah, we're looking for prints. We're looking for associated kill evidence. It was seen chasing the deer into that forest right there. Let's go find it. If it's impacted it and it's predated it, then that's swabbable for DNA evidence, So that's the immediate physical evidence we're looking for. The challenge, though, is if it's a one-off sighting in an area, you have no idea if that's a regular route taken by that animal, or whether that's an experimental ranging route and it's never going to go there again. So is it worth putting up a trail camera for one sighting? Sometimes we do. I was
just about to ask about trail cameras, Would you do
that? Sometimes we do, but without knowing, and the only way you can know is to study a local area for weeks and months at least, for looking for that one animal and its habits. And that's professional full-time efforts. That at the moment, because neither Scottish or UK government recognises these animals as existing in our wildlife, there's zero funding available for their study. So that's a challenge as well. We're self-funded by the nature of the subject as it stands.
So let's just say hypothetically you do have the evidence eventually. Maybe you have it in your fridge right now, and that gets submitted, analysed and verified as being a mountain lion, a black leopard or a lynx. Would there be any immediate changes to the laws, regulations, protection? That's just a Pandora's box that's about to get opened, I'm guessing.
I think we could confidently say there wouldn't. And there wouldn't, because there's already been 5 positive, 4 leopard and 1 Panthera genus, which is probably leopard, DNA results from England alone.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's already been 5, and there's been no change. That's still not enough. If we got one positive DNA result, it'd be interesting, right? We can say that's a good bit of evidence, but that's only a good bit of evidence of one animal. You know, that's all it is.
Yeah.
We
Tough,
we know we're invested in this game in the long term,
because
we are looking to confirm not just one animal is out there, but that this is a big picture. It's been ongoing for decades, and we have established breeding populations. But of course, it takes some amount of work to confirm that. All we are capable of doing at the moment, unfunded anyway, as we are, is little baby steps.
Mm-hmm.
Another little dot in the picture.
You could spend every minute of your day looking at, like,
you could absolutely be full time at this.
All the topography that you've got to take into account on the understanding game trails. Look at wow.
Yeah. A professional team of even 100, say, in Scotland alone, would be again slowly building the picture the same.
Wow.
You know,
and more challenges as well. You know, it's, I guess maybe, well, I guess you can answer this for me. Is skepticism of them even being here, misidentification, is that still something that you commonly come across? Because I'll say that I don't know if you like the guy, if you've ever watched any of his programs, Forrest Galante on Animal Planet. Does a really cool series called Extinct and Alive. He was on a podcast a couple of weeks ago last year, and they just were on about the Panthera DNA being verified in England, and he'd made a comment that it really irked me. And he was like, "Oh, the tinfoil hatters can take their hats off now. They must exist." And I'm like, why are you so skeptic about it?
Yeah.
Why do you have to be so awful?
You know, we have to be skeptical ourselves, actually, and you know, we have to be as objective as we can when it comes to any new sighting coming in. Whether that's historic, it could be 20, 30 years ago, or it could be, you know, in the past minutes or day. Because we have to, from any encounter, get as much detail as possible, because it's really in the detail that we know what we're looking at. Misidentification is something that can happen. We're aware, we absolutely have to be aware of it. There's not only feral cats in Scotland and wild cats, but you get the crossbreed, the hybrid between those. What's known as Kellis cats, which is where Scottish wild cat mates with domestic or feral cat. And that hybrid produces some interesting genetic information that results in them being either jet black, or they can be uniformly grey, or they can be a similar coloration to Scottish wild cat. But there's an interesting side to their physical development where they can grow to 3 or 4 foot long in the body.
Wow.
Now that is the size of a cat capable of taking down at least small deer, at least roe deer or small red. So that could obviously, if it's jet black, be mistaken for an adult leopard. And so we have to be aware when a report comes in, tail length and shape of ears, you know, things like this, if they're seen, we have to get a bead on these. If we don't, and there's any question in our mind, this could be Kellis, it doesn't go in the map. You know, we have to be quite definite, because we're aware that misidentification can happen. Even we've even managed to debunk some images and footage and confirm, actually, that's domestic cat. That can't be any bigger. You know, and we're okay with that, because if we can debunk it and say it's not that, no problem. There's no point in us thinking everything's black leopard. If anyone sees a big cat, it's got to be black leopard. That's not a helpful approach. We have to be as scientific as we can, which means being as objective as possible and, carrying some skepticism. That's okay. But skepticism can be unhealthy when it gets to the grows to the extent of denialism, you know. We do deal with that. Folk who will try and argue with you and try and convince you they don't exist. Well, you can't tell me, mate. I've seen them. I've seen them quite close, I can tell you. And that's, we really just disengage where possible. And our Big Cat Sightings in Scotland Facebook group also has a golden rule of no nonsense. And so we don't tolerate denialists. Somebody comes on and just, you know, tries trolling or whatever, one strike and you're out. Cheerio. We just don't have time for it.
Yeah, like you say, you got there's got to be in it. Like you say, you've got to be objective enough to have a bit of healthy skepticism in you. But you've hit the nail on the head there. The minute that becomes unhealthy, it completely skews your vision. And like you say, you end up just wanting to convince people against their own beliefs. Why on earth would you want to do that?
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
So
all forms of life are out there.
Obviously, you kind of say, I just got that now. Obviously, you spoke there just a while ago. We're kind of speaking on prey. Is there? And we hear of dogs attacking sheep in fields sometimes, with farmers then having to deal with that. Obviously, that happens sometimes when farmers aren't there. The sheep are attacked by a dog. That person never fesses up because he doesn't want the repercussions. Is that something that you can see that can also be misunderstood with a possible big cat?
Yes.
Predation as well.
Yes, actually, yeah, you're spot on. There was an incident actually last year where it was in an area where there's enough big cat lore and legend because there's been enough big cat activity for decades. And it was where folks' minds actually went to after there was a significant sheep attack. I think it was around a dozen sheep, in one go. But, any of us involved in this, we could tell by looking at the photographs, that's not big cat, that's dog. Mm-hmm. You can tell dog attacks generally. Dogs will go nuts, and a lot of the sheep will die of the stress in the moment, die of fright, quite literally, because they're hounding them into a corner and they're terrifying them in the moment. That's not the nature of cats at all when it comes to sheep or deer, any big prey. They're much more clinical. Surgical strike. They will silently approach, bam, take one, drag it off, and, make the most of it then. They don't go running around nuts, stressing sheep out. They don't go just killing one after the other. There's a very complete difference between attacks on livestock with big cat and with dogs. So usually that's quite easy to tell. But it was interesting to see the one last year, because it was in an area where big cats were known. Folks started saying, it could be the big cat, but there is a great difference in the way that they impact and predate.
Yeah, but just going back again, that's really healthy to understand that information though, because while from face value, you could look at a map and hear the reports, I could read them and I could paint my own picture saying, oh well, yeah, that's a big cat. They're seen there now. Obviously, now 12 sheep are dead. It's obviously a big cat. But that healthy element of being a skeptic, while doing things objectively, allows you to say, all right, okay, yeah, we've got big cats here, but while that's a lot of evidence, it isn't the overriding bit of evidence that we're talking about an animal behavior. And the animal behavior is going to trump everything when it comes to identifying, or tends to trump everything else when it comes to identifying that species, because that is the one niggle that I have about my sighting. And that is, why would it be there in the first place as a predator? Now we're talking about crossing roads. My question to you is, how can I definitively tell myself that was a big cat versus a callous cat versus a dog versus your textbook moggy that's just ate too many bits of ham? Yeah.
In the moment of a sighting, when you experience a sighting, you find yourself in an interesting place, a place of kind of shock, but your mind is in the moment rapidly processing. You're rapidly trying to process what it is and what it isn't. A lot of folk first they'll think, is that a dog? First question. And then your mind's picking up on the overall shape, the shape of the head, the shape of the body, the shape of the tail. And when it's still not computing, it's not making sense. Because why would a black leopard be standing in front of you nonchalantly, just looking at you? If males have a cockiness about them in the big cat world, and they do that. And folk are kind of frozen in a way as the mind's just doing all this rapid processing. And it also answers a lot of the folk that are a bit uber skeptical and will say, why are there no photographs? Why are there no photographs? Try taking a photograph in that state.
Well,
while you're still trying to process. And most sightings are fleeting enough. They're usually 5 seconds or less. and it takes you 6 seconds or more to deploy a camera or phone from your pocket, switch it on, take a clear photograph. It's only in the moment, because your mind has done that rapid processing, and you're left with nothing else than that's what I saw. And it's interesting to hear from witnesses on sightings and your own as to what you thought in the moment, and emotionally, your emotional response in the moment, how it made you feel and think for that might be fleeting, sighting time.
Because that's, I mean, like I say, like I don't believe in everything. I'm a skeptic of some things, but I am intrigued by things. And obviously, pareidolia, like you say there, things can happen very, very, very quickly. I'm going to go on a tangent here, little warning. Yeah. I'm a big believer in Bigfoot. A lot of the stories across in America, black bears, like you say, you've just seen something big, black, couple of steps. Oh my God, what is that? That can't be anything other than a man. Well, it's not a man. It's got to be a big ape. It's got to be a big gorilla. Actually, it could have been a bear. You just seen it really quickly, and your mind couldn't process it. But again, the legitimacy of explaining what you've said there, and the emotion was seeing that black cat on the golf course. Like I say, it was a weird sense of people are going to just say this is a dog to me, and I absolutely knew this was not a dog.
Yeah.
And, I guess, is there a bit of a fear of not retribution or embarrassment? What's the word that I'm looking for?
Ridicule.
Ridicule, yeah, that's one. Is that something, maybe not so much now, but is that something maybe historically back, 10, 20 years ago? People were generally quite scared about telling what they've seen because of the ridicule. Is that right? Yeah?
Yep, absolutely. You're absolutely spot on. We have witnesses come to us all the time. We engage with a public outreach stand at the Scottish Game Fair now every year, which is a perfect place for us to be. There's gamekeepers, farmers, naturalists, you name it, country folk out all the time in the environment, and the amount of folk that come to us with sightings is great. It's magic for us. But the amount of folk, that come to us, and they'll qualify it by saying, you're really the first, folk outside a couple of members of my family that I've told. And often they'll say they'll just think folk will take the piss, and
that's it.
And they're just, because it's so far out there, it's such an anomalous thing to experience, and that's the thing when you do experience it. Who are you going to tell? And when it comes to who you're going to tell, who's going to believe you?
Yeah.
So then you question why you would tell anyone in the first place, and a lot of folk just keep that to themselves. Even with my own first sighting, myself and my mate saw it clear as day, short distance from the train, no question what it was, and I don't think I even told my parents.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I even told. I maybe told a couple of very close friends at school, but beyond that, I don't think I told folk going forward, because you question why you would tell folk if you're just going to get ridiculed for it. So it's actually quite common. Common.
Yeah, I totally relate to that, because it's not a common conversation I have every day about seeing a big cat 20 years ago. But I know at times that I have spoken to people, I hold back a little bit of that kind of self-talk of, oh God, he's going to think, what the fuck is he going on about now?
Yeah, absolutely. It's common with a lot of phenomena. Ufology is a perfect example. Somebody sees something completely anomalous, but completely otherwise unexplainable. Clear as day sightings, encounters happen all the time.
Yeah.
But then that puts something on you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's so weird. The implications are the thing.
Mm-hmm.
The implications of to what you've experienced. And that's going to be so far outside other folks' worldview. Do you then put that on them? It's quite a responsibility in a way as to the kind of flack you can get. So a lot of folk just don't even go there. The implication behind telling someone you've seen an animal that is commonly perceived to have been extinct for 1,000 years. It's almost like telling someone in Australia you've seen a Tasmanian tiger. Telling someone you've seen a lynx in Scotland. A similar thing that puts something on you. And a lot of folk just decide not to put it out there.
Yeah, because I mean, another really interesting take as well is even today, even as a society, we're so skeptical that I could go out and by chance turn around the corner and be 10 foot away from a black cat that, as you said, would rather cockily sit there and snigger at me before running away. I've got a perfect photo of it, but I could guarantee it would still come under criticism as being fake.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the problem. You still
of course.
can't. You still
especially
can't release
today,
anything without criticism.
Especially today, when we've not just got, Photoshop, we've got AI.
Yeah, that's it.
It is. It is another consideration. I was engaging on a Facebook group the other day, and somebody asked me, "Well, what's the proof?" I said, "Yeah, we've got various forms of proof. Show us some prints." No problem. I think it was 4 or 5 images of good prints we've got. But then the accusation straight away was, "Oh, but there's nothing to say they were in Scotland."
Yeah.
So then the evidence has to now become more than just, there you go.
Yeah.
It's then prove that came from Scotland. Right. They'll try and push another level of evidence for you to prove. Yeah. So I think with anyone that doesn't believe, it's like, well, okay, fine, good luck with that. I only hope you see one yourself.
Yeah.
Because really, for a lot of folk, we've had, not denialists necessarily, but we've had folk that have said, and one of our team members didn't really believe in them until he saw his own first big cat sighting. And he said, well, I've not got much choice about it now.
Yeah.
Now I know they're out there. Oh,
I'm in. One of
that
us.
changes things.
Yeah, no, like I say, but they're life-changing moments, these things. Like I say, it sparked the same. I mean, I was only, say, 16, 17, 18 at the time. I've always been curious, but that really changed my thought process. So, you start watching programs on it. You, like you said, you start seeing a news clipping, and it suddenly brings you back to that moment again that you see something that you shouldn't really have seen or understand, but it was there anyway. And I get, like, I guess, like, as I say, because time is moving on now, a lot more people have cameras, video, like availability to take photos and videos. Would you assume that we're not far away from getting, the crystal clear image or the crystal clear video? Or is it just a case that these animals are so elusive, they are so smart, that, it could well easily be another decade before you get that physical data that you need to prove that they exist?
I would actually say I've no problems in saying that evidence is already there.
Yeah.
That evidence is already there in terms of the 10 out of 10 images and footage. Of course, there's going to be a choir of folk will scream right now saying, where is it then? We've been shown very good images and very good footage, which the owners just don't want out there.
Mm-hmm.
And the first reason they won't want it out there is because of the pattern we have seen of, even just from a sighting, unscrupulous journalism, fear-mongering, and running with that, with a fear-mongering image of a snarling leopard and words like beast and monster. And, that's not why we do this. We are here seeing a very positive picture of these apex predators managing well, coping just perfectly well in our environment, but actually doing a good job, without really impacting humans and human activity. So why wouldn't we want them to continue if they're already naturalized enough in numbers throughout the land? So we don't want our good stuff that we've already got just, we're not going to take it to the media basically for that reason. And a lot of folk that have that good evidence that does exist, the 10 out of 10 images and footage does exist, but it's not going out there. And it's not going out there for that good reason. That this is a long-term game we're involved in realizing that there are animals out there that should be taken care of. There should be conservation protection measures, but let's just slowly gather that evidence base until such times as we can brief the appropriate government departments to say, here is that big picture, and it's solid.
Brilliant. Yeah, like I say, I can't wait for that day. It'll be validation with myself as well. But you're right, though, about the fear-mongering aspect. Another interest of mine is sharks. Animal biology, love to study sharks. I've looked at sharks all my life. You don't get many sharks in the UK. I would still say statistically, you're more than likely to get attacked by a shark in the UK waters than you are from a black leopard in Scotland. But you absolutely know that if you submitted a picture to the Scottish Sun, what they're going to do with that photo and how many people it's going to kill.
I wonder.
Oh man, it'd be awful. It's true. It's true. Paul, I've absolutely loved this talk for you this afternoon. This has been probably my favorite podcast episode to date, actually.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been the fastest 65 minutes I ever did know. Obviously, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming onto the podcast after the issues that we've had trying to get together with it. Just for the easygoing nature of this podcast has been so informative. You've answered everything exactly the way that I was hoping you were going to answer it. And I just hope that more people listening to this are going to turn doubters into believers. And then, we'll all enjoy the evidence when we can say that we have these species fundamentally living in Scotland. I wish you all the best of success in the future. With that, is there anything that you'd like to say to the listeners before we close off?
I would, if I can ask, if anyone listening has had their own sighting and they've not been in touch before, please get in touch. Love to hear from you. Get your sighting on the map at least. Big Cat Sightings in Scotland is our Facebook group, and you can find us through that easily enough. And we are the Scottish Big Cat Research Team. And if you haven't seen anything, keep an open mind, I would say, and keep your eyes open too. And if you ever do see something, then please get in touch.
Yeah, not just
It's been a pleasure, Andrew, and thanks very much for the opportunity.
Honestly, man, I've absolutely loved it, and like I say, there's just so much. It's just a subject I love talking about. Like I say, it did change my life as well, and it's really cool that it, probably 20 years time, I'm actually sat down discussing it with somebody again because I know how much it affected me as well. So, yeah, Paul, thank you so much once more for coming on the podcast, and I wish you and your team all the best in the future, getting that evidence so we can all cheer together at the end of it, mate, as well.
Much appreciated, Andrew. Thanks very much. An absolute pleasure.
And guys, like Paul said there, if you'd like to look on Facebook and check out his group, all the information and the links are going to be in the episode description below. If you are watching on YouTube, it would be fantastic at this point if you just drop a like and subscribe, and any comments if you'd like to follow on with them. Yeah, that's just about it. This has been a phenomenal episode. I really hope you've enjoyed it, and I really hope you're a believer like we are too. From Paul Macdonald and the Big Cats of Scotland field team, and from Andrew Willicks here and IMO from the Borderline podcast, good night.
Night.